From one star to the other. 3 Star Wars videos in a row, and today we talk about Starfield. First off, for those of you celebrating, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're all having a fantastic holiday and eating pretty good. To the rest of you, happy Thursday. Anyway, today we're talking about Starfield, where it's received its biggest update yet in the form of a patch adding a new feature, one that is key to PC performance. We're also going to get into what is an interesting announcement from Bethesda Game Studios involving Creation Club and mods, where they're all going down quite soon for extended maintenance. So we wonder what's on the horizon. We're also naturally going to talk about Starfield's player count being eclipsed by Skyrim, and whether or not this is an achievement through the magnificence of Skyrim or a real dud for Starfield. And last but not least, Starfield has been rated as mixed on Steam, and naturally I want to talk about that because I see many people talking about it. Matty, what do you think about the latest BGS game being reviewed so low over on Steam? Does it really matter? We'll talk about all that here today in the biggest update we've had for Starfield since the game has launched. If you're new here, you're into Starfield news, conversation, information, updates, all that stuff, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing. I expected to be making more Starfield videos after launch than I actually have, only because there really hasn't been much to talk about. It's been oddly quiet for such a successful game, but we'll get into that. Anyway, the first one I want to get into here is this peculiar announcement from Bethesda Game Studios that reads on their Twitter account: "We're planning an extended maintenance window for in-game mods and Creation Club services starting the morning of November 29th. During this downtime, Skyrim mods and Creation Club content you have already downloaded will still be accessible along with the game. However, players will not be able to access the mods and Creation Club services or be able to change mod load orders. The Skyrim mods website will also undergo maintenance during this window, and the ability to upload content from the Creation Kit will be temporarily unavailable. We thank you for your patience during this long maintenance window and encourage you to keep an eye on our official Bethesda Game Studios Discord for more details and updates." So the big question with this one is, why? Why for so long? Why Skyrim? This could be one of two things. It could be a lot of people I saw predicting online Starfield Creation Club incoming, Starfield console mods incoming. I think given there's Creation Engine 2, there's going to be a whole different approach to how modding is done. We've already seen that online with some people reporting different experiences making mods for Starfield. It's not really as clear as I think many of us anticipated it would be, but maybe a year from now, that'll be a different situation. So this could be done in preparation for Starfield, but it's also possible that this is tied to Skyrim's marketplace, which is something we've tracked on SteamDB for a while, and it seems more and more likely that this Minecraft marketplace-like thing is coming to Skyrim, and if you're doing extended maintenance for the game, this could be why. But I wanted to make sure I addressed this first and foremost. That's because it was only a couple of months ago that when Todd Howard was doing an interview with Famitsu that we learned that modding would be done in 2024 with the official tools out for everyone, and I imagine that Creation Club would follow up after all of that. So all of this is likely maintenance to prepare for that, but also just think the timing is a little too suspicious, and this could also tie into the Fallout 4 Next Gen update, which is apparently still coming out this year. No updates since we got the announcement last year. So otherwise, it could be dealing with that since we're going to get Creation Club content that is considered a bonus as part of that update. We'll see. It could be connected to Starfield, but what is connected to Starfield is this new update that was announced over on the Bethesda net, where you'll see here that there were 2 key features added in NVIDIA DLSS support. This was actually added in a beta over on Steam, and they were testing that. And then after testing that, now it's out for everybody because everything's all clear. Meanwhile, the other notable feature added is Let Them Eat. By popular request, we have added the ability to ingest food and drink items upon finding them in the environment. You can enjoy those chunks immediately or save them for later. The choice is yours. This update, in a sense, has, I'll get into the nitty-gritty in a moment, kind of enforced some people's frustrations with Starfield. The problems with the game to many are big, and by that I mean like exploration. So when Bethesda's coming out 2 months after launch, no real roadmap of sorts, and they go, hey gamers, you can now eat chunks sitting out in the open world. What about exploration? What about spaceship travel? What are you doing to ameliorate those problems? And it's amplifying some people's frustration, and the question is being asked now, are these updates enough? And I hate to be neutral on this. I get both sides of the equation here. I get how fans are feeling impatient. It's been a couple of months. This game has been a runaway success, at least financially and player count wise, to justify Bethesda's continued investment in it. And players want to know, hey, we have issues with the game. how are you going to address them? In 2023, we've had a lot of instant gratification. Great games have surrounded us. Great experiences are being dropped day one in Game Pass constantly, for example. So your next good time is only a click away, and you don't have to hang with one game for a while. So people are displaying patience for Starfield, and when you're getting updates like, oh, DLSS support a couple months after launch, we thought this would be like a week or two, and eating food, that's really not a major game changer. I get why people are frustrated. It makes complete sense to me. Meanwhile, for Bethesda Game Studios, we did have an important update that happened via an interesting video posted on Wired from Todd Howard, where he was talking about his career. And one thing he revealed there was a small detail, is that 250 people are currently working on Starfield, around that number. That is a pretty decent workforce. And knowing that workforce versus what we're getting, people are expecting updates to come out in a bigger fashion. In that sense, I kind of sympathize with Bethesda that, hey, it's only been about 2-3 months now. I don't think they can introduce, say, survival mode and be like, hey, here it is, everybody. I feel like the main focus, if I'm judging based off updates they're doing and how they're presenting Creation Club and modding, I think they're gearing up for the new year to be kind of like how Halo Infinite was gearing up for the Forge, right? The post-launch support didn't truly begin for Halo Infinite in a positive manner until the Forge was a big part of the equation. Now Halo Infinite, as I've covered in a separate video, is really firing on all cylinders. You have the Halo 3 Refueled playlist, which is then going to get added to the general matchmaking, so you'll have a bunch of Halo 3 maps, you have new weapons getting added, the progression's there, but you need that fan content first to have some influx of like, things are happening with this game. So I feel like Bethesda Game Studios wants to get console mod support set up, Creation Club set up, and then really go gung-ho on massive updates like Starfield's survival mode, like Starfield's next big expansion in Shattered Space. And it goes back to what I've said before. Bethesda's biggest enemy is a lack of communication, and I get they don't want to talk too soon, but I do understand why at this point it wouldn't be a crazy idea to say like, hey, while you're flexing that you've passed millions and millions of players by in milestones, that you also let us know what your plans are for these millions and millions of players. Right now, it's kind of a feeling of empty promises. Like we've learned, oh, you're going to be here for at least 5 years supporting the game. Cool. What's that entail? What are your ideas? What's floating around? Back to the update, they also mentioned here under gameplay that they adjusted stealth to be a bit more forgiving. Thank goodness. I think of this mission that I had to do for the Crimson Fleet, and I had to infiltrate a facility, and the stealth there was totally broken. And it's something I talked about in my final verdict video that I really noticed it more so after playing more Cyberpunk, but that Starfield stealth is more like perimeter scouring rather than actually going in and infiltrating. So I'm happy that they're addressing that concern there. Again, I understand with like all the procedural content and loading screens and lack of exploration, that's what people want adjusted. But in the terms of little things, I'm happy to see this little thing I had a problem with getting tackled. They've addressed a bunch of graphical issues, quest issues, and so on and so forth. Obviously, you can read all of this over on Bethesda.net. So not too bad overall, but is this the update the game needed? I think it's a step in the right direction, but we're not going to get that massive weight off our shoulders and relief until the full force of modding falls upon Starfield, where you look at something like Skyrim, and we'll talk about that now. Some of the mods that game is getting are incredible. And why that's relevant is because right now, if you look at Starfield's player count, you'll see that in the 24-hour peak, Starfield hit 22,106 players. Meanwhile, Skyrim Special Edition has eclipsed that. Mildly so, but the fact that they're in the same ballpark to many, they find absolutely terrifying. Now, what I did was I took this a bit of a step further, and I looked at, okay, what was the drop-off when Starfield was coming out? Were a ton of people from Skyrim migrating over to Starfield, or did it stay consistent? And when you look at that player count here, you'll see that September, the month the game came out, there was a 4,000 player drop-off. And since then, it hasn't seen a major pickup, but more so a return to normalcy, if anything. So what I get from this is that it's not more people leaving Starfield and going to Skyrim again. It's more so people are just leaving Starfield, which is a pretty important correlation, I think, to make. Now, otherwise, what's also important to point out is while this is Steam, you go over to Xbox's most played games, and you see here that Starfield is still sitting firmly within the top 10 with some of your most popular, if you will, casual games, your Call of Duties, your Fortnites, your sports games, your GTAs, your Minecrafts, all that stuff. Starfield has been firmly sitting in that spot since it released in early access, which is a pretty powerful sign of the amount of players it's seeing there, which this is where it would be nice if Xbox gave us more metrics. At the end of the day, they do not. Anyway, I think that Starfield's player count is actually going to go up over time, which I know many people are going to scoff at that take. The difference to me between Starfield and Skyrim is that, like, Skyrim was borderline perfect in many ways at launch. I'd say the most thing I could be critical of with the game was the writing and the lack of player expression and dialogue. But modding has just taken that game on a whole completely different journey, right? I was looking at this mod pack called Novus, and it is absolutely mind-blowing what modders have done. As someone who covers this game, by the way, I never saw this before. The amount of combat overhauls, the amount of animations added, the fact that this game looks like a 2023 game now. Skyrim is doing something clearly special, and it has the benefit of a decade's worth of modding power behind it. I think that as Starfield goes on this extremely long journey too, that as you see complete overhaul mods, like imagine a Star Wars overhaul pack where you're getting into starship fights and the factions that are established are from Star Wars. Like, you're gonna see total conversion mods like this that have met Fallout 4, met Skyrim, and you're gonna see that player count go up. So again, this is not to dissuade that Skyrim isn't doing something special here. It is. It's also not to push away the notion that Starfield may be underperforming to some degree. I will say that this player count is really good for a single player game, but it's the fact that it's next to one that's a decade old, or in the case of Skyrim Special Edition, less than a decade old, that is concerning to some. So it's a lot more nuanced in my opinion, given the stats we have of the drop-offs during Starfield's launch, that it seems like more people are just falling off of Starfield rather than migrating over to Skyrim. That said, I have been playing a lot of Skyrim lately because I'm working on some videos for it, and it really is a special game, but I will save that whole conversation for a separate video. Last thing I wanted to get into here was Starfield being rated as mixed over on Steam, so it's no longer mostly positive. It's now firmly sitting in mixed. This, I gotta say, didn't see coming. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real. Like, I really do like Starfield a lot. I think it's a flawed game through and through. I've gone through why I think that's the case in my review, and I just think at the end of the day that mixed is a really strong message to be sent here, and I wonder how Bethesda Game Studios receives all of this. I say that because when you look at the reception of Fallout 4 and 76, much of the mechanics that are established in Starfield feel like a clear answer to the problems of those games. Oh, you want more questing, more dialogue, you don't want a voice character. I think Starfield is a successful answer to all of those problems at the end of the day. It's, to me, the execution and the design decisions that get this game a bit snakebitten that I think drag it down to the mixed rating. I think of, for example, you have all this dialogue, but instead of funneling things through skill checks, you go through the persuasion mini. I will say, personally speaking, that mixed is a pretty harsh rating to me, but that is not a representation of what everyone else believes. I've said it before, I love Fallout and Elder Scrolls more than Starfield, but I wouldn't call it a game that I would put in like the mixed category. I would say it's a great game with some noteworthy flaws, but there is a lot of fun stuff to find in here, and it's one of the games I spent the most time with. I spent over 100 hours with it, but I also get why it's a controversial game. You know, there are things that people were expecting out of it, and there was a lot of pressure on it naturally, and for many, it didn't live up to that. So it's not to say that if you believe it's mixed, you're wrong. I'm just, as the guy on the camera, I'm just trying to express my personal feelings on the rating. But at the end of the day, I really am curious what the takeaway from Bethesda Game Studios is going to be, because I think you can kind of camouflage it all with numbers and financial success, which is clearly there, and I've talked about all of that. But when you see a mixed rating like that, and you think of how long this game was in development for, the new engine, and the real focus, it seemed like getting back to older Bethesda. It's almost like they went too old and went back to like Daggerfall instead of Oblivion, and many people didn't like that. Here we are now with Starfield rated a bit lower, and so this sets up one of two scenarios now with modding and with Creation Club. Do we see Starfield get back on its horse and on the uprising, and it screeches past mostly positive? Because I guess that's the benefit of Starfield. I mentioned before, it's this kind of single player service game where, you know, with the expansions and everything that's going to be added, it'll be a totally different game years from now. That's why in my final verdict video, I said I wanted to have that video for posterity's sake, because there's a chance that a year from that video, that the game is totally different, that there are a ton of things added that change how I feel about the product, maybe for better, maybe for worse. So we'll see as things shift over time, but that is your big Starfield update, ladies and gentlemen. I'm looking forward to your thoughts. Keep it clean down below to the best of your abilities. I know it's Starfield and that gets people all hot and bothered, but let's try to be good to one another. And with that, I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts, and I will catch you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the heck out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.